I want to go back to the Isaiah reading with these words. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it shall blossom abundantly and rejoice with joy and singing. Joy. Unless I'm talking about going camping, I do not usually think of finding joy in the wilderness. The word wilderness, when used metaphorically and in Scripture, often means times that are unfamiliar, uncertain, and somewhat uncomfortable. We might even add to that list of uns that wilderness times are sometimes unwanted. Yet the prophet Isaiah tells us to expect our wilderness times to be the very times in which we are most likely being led to joy. The very times, wilderness times, in which we are most likely, if we get through them, to find joy. In the Old Testament reading, which we read this morning, the prophet Isaiah explores and expounds on this metaphor of wilderness as a place where we can expect to find joy. Isaiah proclaims that it is in the wilderness of life that the majesty and power of God will always be made known. He says that it is in the wilderness of life that God will strengthen us where we are weak and save us from whatever it is we fear. I might add to that it's often only in the wilderness of life when we are ready to realize we have a weakness that needs to be strengthened. It's often only in the wilderness times of life that we are willing to say that we're afraid of something and are willing to be saved from it. So Isaiah says we can expect that in our weakness in the wilderness, God will act. In our fear in the wilderness, God will save. Isaiah announces that it is in the wilderness of life that God prepares a highway. He calls it a holy way. And then he expounds on that way, saying that it is the way that leads us to the kind of life that is completely abundant and always eternal. And Isaiah promises us that it is in trusting God to provide this way in the wilderness, while continuing to walk through the wilderness, that we will discover joy. As I consider the kind of trust it takes to do that, the kind of trust it takes to be right in the middle of our own wilderness times, those times of uncertainty and discomfort and fear and weakness, when I think about the kind of trust it takes that God is still leading us to joy, even though all those parts of our wilderness are true. When I think of that, I am reminded of a meditation I read in a book called Journey to the Heart by Melody Beatty. Her meditation goes like this, and I am quoting most of that meditation. She says, "We live in a magical, living, vital, and personal universe. A world where universal love is real. And we don't just live in it, we are a part of it, visibly and tangibly connected to it." And then she gives some examples of what that connection to this universal love of God that pervades the universe, in which we are an integral part. She gives some examples of how that comes to us. She says, the phone call that comes just at the right time. A book that teaches us what we need to know. A movie that has the message we need to guide us and open our hearts an opportunity that arises at just the right moment. An idea triggered by something someone says, or even an object that we just didn't even notice before. These are all examples. Examples of how God speaks to us in that connection. And then she says, the more we open to universal love, the more it will be there for us, embracing us, holding us, guiding us. The more we learn to see that universal love in these small, ordinary ways, the more it will be there until we wonder why we never saw it before. Have you ever had that experience? Right in the middle of your wilderness times? Or something someone says kind of catches your attention. You may not even realize what it means, and you might not even like what they said to begin with. The highways that God prepares for us through our wilderness times, the holy ways, the holy way, comes to us from the universal love of God in whatever form it comes. And it speaks of a love God has for all of creation. And that universal love, whether we see it or not in our wilderness times, is always with us. Even in the most chaotic of wilderness times, always with us is the sacred love through which we are all connected not only one to another, but also to the mystical, powerful love of God. Always with us is this divine love. The divine love which Jesus made known to us in human form. The divine love which sneaks into our wilderness times in simple, ordinary ways, like the phone calls, the books, the movies, the opportunities, the ideas, the objects mentioned in the meditation, or even the baby born in a stable to parents who couldn't even find room in an inn. In the wilderness, God uses the simple, ordinary stuff of life to catch our attention, to nudge us on, and to lead us through our own wilderness times in life. May we have the eyes to see the many ways through the wilderness which God provides for us. May we have the trust we need to keep walking through our wilderness until we find that joy. Amen.
Amen.